Hello and most welcome to 1475. This is a continuation of 1473. The passivity of reason. And we are talking about Stimmung, a Heideggerian neologism, I would say, or a new use of the word Stimmung. That is very hard to capture. But same words and same meanings can have different Stimmung. It's a helping tool. English often uses mood, but it is not absolutely correct. I will continue where I left off. Page 150, second paragraph, beginning with the at-2. And we've been discussing anxiety, that is the unification of body and mind, and how Kierkegaard had a significant influence in Heidegger. And how the contradictions between pathos and ratio, logos and affectio, is in Luther a nullifying tendency, whereas in Heidegger it's the very force where everything starts to spin. Heraclitus also comes to mind here. Let's say night and day, fire and water. How these, on one level, incongrual and stopping forces at another level can be the driving force. The very same ones that produces paradoxes and irresolvable antithesis will at a higher level bring about, lead to presencing. So, second paragraph on page 150. With these points of reference in mind, it is now time to approach Heidegger's analysis of Stimmung from what is hopefully a somewhat more qualified perspective. at a first glance. The reader of Sein und Zeit may have difficulties seeing at what point the work ties on to the classic question of reason and passion. First of all, Heidegger does not speak explicitly of passions, nor of the basic pillars in all previous theories of passions, namely pleasure and pain. Instead, he introduces at one point in the book the technical term of Befindlichkeit. Often translated as state of mind. Explicating that it denotes what we usually know as Stimmung, attunement or mood. Furthermore, he introduces this theme in the course of an analysis of human Dasein as being in the world. a complex structure to which he also locates the capacity to understand and use language, I think it should be here. And the use of language, I would say. In order to see clearly where he is heading, as well as from where he is coming, one needs to have an overall grasp of his project. So, what kind of project is Sein und Zeit? Its explicit aim is to raise again the classical Greek question of the meaning of being. The Seinsfrage. My comment. However, it approaches this task from the hermeneutic insight that the question as such does not have a clear meaning, and that it therefore has to be elaborated in advance. The form of this elaboration is an exploration of the being of the one who raises the question, namely man. Or as he is called here by a neutral term, Dasein. Sein und Zeit is an ontological exploration of human Dasein in the service of preparing the ground for the ontological question of the meaning of being. More precisely, it is an exploration of the structures whereby Dasein has access to a world, including its own being. Or how it constitutes an opening in which things come to stand as they do. And here are some interesting thoughts. The structures whereby Dasein has access to a world, that could be parallel to the grammar of a life world in Wittgenstein. Heidegger does not go into, extensively at least, into the structures, but they still need to be understood. So grammar and structure can be compared. premise for the investigation is phenomenological, in the sense that no sense of objective being or objective reality is taken for granted. But the meaning of reality in all its forms is precisely the issue. There is a general technical term for this openness. Heidegger speaks of it as Daseins Erschlossenheit, its disclusiveness. Erschlossenheit. Especially listen to the following. This concept signifies a reflexive structure whereby Dasein discloses itself toward the world and where the world is disclosed to Dasein. This is essential to understand the reflexive structure. We have gone into depth about this earlier. We call it interpenetration usually, or loop, as Hofstadter calls it. Going into oneself is the same in some aspect as going to the world. It is the inner organization and composition of this openness that Heidegger investigates under the heading of Daseins, being in the world. Did you hear? The inner organization is an active and important part of being in the world. Do not miss that. Otherwise, you will think being in the world is some sort of exclusive outsideness. A very common misunderstanding of being in the world. The traditional pre-Kantian philosophical counterpart to these analyses would perhaps be the analysis of perception or of experience in a more or less qualified sense. The answer which is sought is similar, namely, how does one man have access to the world? Listen now. But Heidegger discards the simple notion of experience as input and transport from one sphere to the other. So my comment is a thorn in the side of representationalism, empiricism, and everyday thinking. In this in this regard, his immediate predecessor is rather a Kantian transcendental aesthetic, filtered through Husserl's theory of intentionality. However, he brings the tradition of transcendental grounding of experience a step further, in a way which ultimately displaces the very meaning in this philosophical project. Where Husserl speaks of a transcendental field of experience, Heidegger speaks of disclosedness as such. And this again is a complex phenomenon constituted by three so-called equiprimordial elements. State of mind or attunement, Befindlichkeit, understanding, verstehen, and language, Rede. In Heidegger, all these have different meanings from everyday use, but together they make sense. It is decisive to see the context here. State of mind or attunement is not a psychological fact, not some kind of subjective aspect. Instead, it is presented and analyzed as an essential element of the very organization of Dasein's access to the world. I will repeat part of this sentence because it's pertinent, and that is state of mind, Befindlichkeit, is not a psychological fact, not some kind of subjective aspect. Very accurately and sharply pointed out by Hans Riem, and often the reason Dasein and thereby Sein und Zeit gets misunderstood. It is not a subjective aspect, and neither is Dasein. It's the structure of entering into the world. It is the essentially affective aspect of givenness as such. to have a world, to have access to beings, is to be disposed in a certain manner, to be in a certain mood. That is Stimmung. What then is the phenomenological characteristics of this existentiale, as Heidegger calls it? This is existentiale compared to anxiety in Kierkegaard, and what later came to be the existentialist movement. First of all, the mood is that in which Dasein always finds itself as already there. Dasein is always in a state of mind, handed over to itself and its situation. It is, as Heidegger puts it, früh, geworfen. The fact that this state of mind, for the most part, is not something that one particularly notices, that it appears only as the dull mood of everyday existence. Does not mean that it is nothing. It is precisely in this dull, everyday attunement that Dasein is given over to itself, in which the world is disclosed to it. And once more, the dullness is very close to the grammar of the language game. It's under the surface. It is grayed out. It's everyday existence. But it is exactly there that Dasein is given over to itself. It's where everything happens. Dasein can, of course, influence its own moods. It can seek to enhance its mood by seeking pleasure and enjoyment, and it can try to gather itself in a more serious mood. But the fundamental truth is that it can never not be in one of its moods. That is also very important. It is always in one Stimmung, in one mood or another one. It can never be out of mood. Being in the mood, in a state of mind, is part of what it means to be human, and thus part of what it means to have access to the world. This is just great. It is an irreducible fact of human condition, not just a coloring or an aspect. In this sense, Heidegger is perfectly in accord with Spinoza. There's no state of unaffectedness, only sequences of effects within which one can move, but which can never be transcended as such. Thus, the topic of moods is not a psychological issue, but an ontological issue. And it is only by freeing it from the psychological interpretations that its true importance can be appreciated. So what we have here is a massive problem in the understanding of Sein and Zeit. That is the psychologization of Dasein. And that would be an absolute stopper for any understanding. It is an ontological issue, not merely a psychological issue. So I've been trying to explain. I have to mention this is an extensively demanding text. It takes actually that you understood Heidegger to most levels and read Sein and Zeit, and I will say a lot more. But I see ways into this text, and grammar of the language game is one of those. Because head-on only understand this, it is not really possible. You don't have the background. It's a bit like trying to read Chinese from just a few pages. You need to have understanding before. Let's see if I can help with this by using different tools. But there definitely are some gems here. To start from the end, it is you are always in a mood. That in itself is an important clue. And it is precisely in the dull, everyday attunement that Dasein is given over to itself, is also a gem. It's the very dullness. To help, you could call that unconscious or below the level of attention. It's not really true, but it's helpful. Like all dialectics, they are never true, but it goes into the level you are at. A third gem is, it's decisive to see the context here. State of mind or attunement is not, I remember that, is not a psychological fact. Not some kind of subjective aspect. And I will make a summary. I will also look into the three equiprimordial: Finglichkeit, Verstehen and Rede. They make sense together in my comment here. Not single-handedly, not translated or understood within one's own thinking, but in a togetherness. The pause here for the summary. So I took some terms and explanations from the text, and I will try to make a very shorthand explanation of something that takes a thorough read and understanding of Heidegger. The first one, Erschlossenheit, the disclosedness of Dasein, is very similar to what we talked in many episodes earlier about interpenetration. Must be around 1,000 episodes ago we mentioned the Matyushka, the Russian doll, where each layer are isolated, and for each layer you sort of pile off the matryoshka, they are all separated. Here it was a recommendation of Lucio Diego Rapoport to see the different in-size-wise dolls to be connected, a sort of fourth dimension, if you like. This is almost to the point as a Schlossenheit. It discloses itself by its reflexive structure. And this is in stark contrast to the input-output idea of being in the world, which we have sort of as an everyday philosophy. Another important thing here that can be helpful for the understanding is that this is actually a movement. In the input-output model, we get nullification, as Rolf Cachet calls it. We come back to the same position. So, you start here, you will come back because the outside exactly matches the inside. But the matryoshka and also the Klein bottle shows there is a temporal aspect. This, so to speak, second leg of Sein und Zeit, Zeit is time, is often not completely understood. The spiral here is an excellent tool to clear out that misunderstanding. And I would say that misunderstanding is inevitable without carefully reading Heidegger, because it lies within our everyday philosophy. The spiral goes back, but it does so on another level, a later level. So time is the act of interpenetration. It is what makes things have direction and form. This is pointing to the Sein, what is. The primordial first move. We usually think that difference or something to be unlike is simple, but it is nothing simple with it. It is the first cause. The separation is primordial, fundamental in the very strictest sense, and makes for all other differences. I usually think of this as a helping thing to say there is no difference in itself. It doesn't have an inner nature. It's called ensui.
Which language?
I don't know. Insui maybe.
Is it one word?
2 words.
2 words.
Mentioned by Rosen.
Mm-hmm.
Could be insui. In itself to be different doesn't exist. If you think of it deeply, and understanding that difference is foundational can come. But that is hidden in the everyday life. And I like this dull everyday attunement is actually where Dasein is given to itself. So what seems as dullness to me is the ongoing directionality of Dasein. How do we know that? Well, because Dasein is always in one mood. It is not moodless. It has in itself a difference. Because that is what it does, so to speak, I comment. You can compare that to the interpenetrative mood of the Klein bottle or of the Matyushkas. The second thing is something that demands thorough understanding of these things. You need to be able to have all three flowing, but it can be helpful to see them as interacting. Once you get a grip of all three, they will together make out a very simple play. But be careful here not to translate them separately. They do not yield to that. Heidegger constructed these for a reason, not for us to directly translate them. Otherwise they would be already translated. That you are somewhere, I can ridiculously simplify. Understanding is connected to stand, how you stand. And I would say that is very close to localization, a thing that we've been discussed before. And I think localization can here be helpful for the understanding. Rede, see that as an extended form of language that brings out and brings in both inner and outer. That is very important. So you don't fall into the trap of language being about the world, representing the world, or being mere signifiers for what's out there is signified. Yeah, so far my summary. Maybe my dear colleague Kalle has some points here. See, I would move the microphone to his.
Thank you, thank you. Hofstadter, you mentioned him in the bathing, so I will take him up. Strange. So it's Douglas Hofstadter was strange loop.
I quite like what you wrote there, strangled loop.
Okay, you still need a L there. No, but let me go first back here to this. I didn't realize that Rosen, of course, meant en soi. It means in French in itself, and it mentioned also in itself. You see it here, en soi,
Yeah.
in itself.
What would be the Latin variety of that one?
En soi, no, let me not try to guess here. I think he thinks in the French.
It could also be in the Latin variety, but yeah, we get back to that.
It would be Latin, it would be in Swedish. So.
Oh, that's the one.
Yes, it must be Latin.
Yeah.
But don't take my word like this.
No, I.
Okay, so let's leave this and go to this conception here. And I will repeat one phrase from this excellent paper by Hans Ruin, page 151. Heidegger speaks of the Erschlossenheit, disclosedness. This concept signifies a reflexive structure, whereby Dasein discloses itself toward the world, and where the world is disclosed to Dasein. And here you aptly come back to Hofstadter's strange loop. And I have studied this strange loop. It is often synonymous with entangled hierarchy. It's not always synonymous because he is a little bit fluid, but often it's synonymous with entangled hierarchy. And you see this in M.C. Escher's drawing hands, where one hand draws the other hand. In this specific case, if we apply it to Heidegger, so this concept signifies a reflexive structure where Dasein is disclosed to the world, and where the world is disclosed to Dasein. That is, you could say like this: you have Dasein, that is the human being, let's say, and you have the world. Here, you could see it almost as a dichotomy, but they are not a dichotomy. They are exactly the same. Because the Dasein is already in the world. Dasein is already in the world, and there is an integrated hierarchy. They are on the same level, because Dasein is already in the world, and they are like the drawing hands by Escher. One hand draws the other. So you could see like one hand is drawing the world, and the world is drawing you. So there is no difference between Dasein and the world. They are one and the same, in the sense that they are entangled. One is not better than the other, the one needs the other. Like in, let's say, man and a woman or whatever, dichotomy, if you call them dichotomies. And I would finally, let me go to the next page. Yes, Spinoza. I have to admit that I've never been a great friend of Spinoza. I think he's a almost an 80. I know there is a lot of fans of Spinoza, but this is my view a bit of Spinoza. So Hans Römer writes, Heidegger is perfect in accord with Spinoza. There is no state of unaffectedness, only sequences of affects within which one can move, but which can never be transcended as such. I think this is important. That is, we are always in the mood, as Hans Römer also stated here. So 51, he said, Dasein is always in the state of mind, so it's the same thing. So Spinoza seems to agree with Heidegger and vice versa. So I give it back to you.
Very good. Mentioning Asher's hand, one can also see subject-object, or what we usually call subject-object, in the fashion of one hand touching another hand. So you have toucher, perception if you like, because you know. Verstehen, you know where, you localize. There is an understanding which parallels Rede. This movement is the same as the interpenetration in the Klein bottle. It is the Klein bottle, so to speak, touching the other, thereby making it an other. Otherwise there would not be a difference. It makes also time, because it takes time, and this is the spiral. In his excellent book Gödel, Escher, Bach, he looks carefully and very, very specific into Gödel. He tries to, so to speak, simultaneously, without Zeit, without this taking time, having only localization to make the mathematical system, so to speak, static from that point of view, where everything accords with everything without time. And this is exactly this input-output idea that Heidegger realizes comes from a misconception of sorts, or as he usually calls it, a forgetfulness. We'll continue with the text. You can put it down there. Just pour myself some coffee. Thank you, Kalle. Very good. Excellent.
So 1 hour 21 so far.
3-1?
1 hour and 21 so far. 1 hour and 21 on this April the 4th, 2003.
I continue where I left off, and we now progress to page 152. And the psychological interpretations are, I think that is a default move when you start reading Sein und Zeit or interpretations and scriptures about and of Heidegger. Thus, the topic of mood is not a psychological issue, but an ontological issue. And it is only by freeing it from the psychological interpretations that its true importance can be appreciated. And then I continue. The obvious argument against such a view would be that there is indeed a way in which the world is. Independently of how it appears through the fleeting moods of individual Dasein. Therefore, it is also of central importance to Heidegger's argument that he can show how the very idea of objective being is rooted in one particular attuned interpretation. So the objective being is also a particular attuned interpretation. Something that we often forget or ignore, or maybe more aptly, we are unaware of it. Consequently, a significant portion of his analysis is devoted to the specific mode of the theoretical attitude. My take on that is he wants to reveal that it is a mood by showing how it works. Indirectly, very parallel to the language games of the later Wittgenstein, where he wants to show what role objective takes in the language game, its proper use, so to speak. And I would say that also goes hand in hand with the former, because if you don't understand the working mood, you will end up thinking in terms of psychological interpretation. interpretations. You need also to have the understanding of the objective mood established. See its proper role. And then you can go further. This theoretical attitude toward the world is only possible on the basis of a series of transformations whereby Dasein withdraws from its practical concerns, its being in the everyday experience, my comment, withdraws itself and its immediate interests. It should be immediate here, it says immediate. Into a perspective where beings are disclosed irrespective of their position, Befindlichkeit, within the totality of means and ends, in which they are initially revealed. There is a forgetfulness of Geschichte here. So we look at the things as they didn't have a Geschichte. And I will repeat this last. Whereby Dasein withdraws from its practical concerns and its immediate interests. Into a perspective where beings are disclosed irrespective of their position within the totality of means and ends in which they are initially revealed. The pointer here, although a bit of simplification, is the objective mood pushes temporality to the side. That this takes time, or is time. The theoretical conception of the world is itself a result of transformation of moods. In which the world is disclosed in a new fashion. But where but where other previous aspects of its givenness are simultaneously covered over. So it's a new way of disclose the world and previous aspects, not only Befindlichkeit and Geschichte, other aspects are covered over. So it's a uncovering and covering process. This in no way contradicts the classical conception of philosophy. Also in Aristotle's metaphysics, we read of how philosophy belongs to a particular phase of life when all basic needs are secured. A passage which Heidegger also quotes in the relevant section. In fact, the Aristotelian background to these philosophical concerns is much more substantial than the brief references in Sein und Zeit betrays. If we go back to the lecture courses which Heidegger gave during the first half of the 20s, some of which are published, and some of which exist only in manuscript. It immediately becomes clear to what extent his new and often apparently idiosyncratic terminology is really only a creative translation of Aristotelian concepts. The very word Befindlichkeit, e.g., is first introduced in the 1924 lecture course on the basic concepts of Aristotelian philosophy. As a direct translation of diathesis. As this is used in rhetoric, to describe how man finds himself in shifting moods. The first example of which is joy and pleasure. The analysis presented in this course is interesting not only as a basis for understanding how and from what sources Heidegger first develops his conception of moods, but also for what it contains that is not found in Sein und Zeit. Not least the detailed preoccupation with pleasure, hedonic, which is even equated with life itself, or its mood of having itself. this aspect is particularly noteworthy in the view of the often rightfully voiced critique against Heidegger's treatment of moods in Sein und Zeit, where anxiety is given such a dominant position over and against other possible moods. So there are a lot of gems in this part of the article. The condensation of all of Heidegger, because he also brings in things not published in Sein und Zeit. And the repeated sentence earlier, this theoretical attitude, we talk about the different moods and that the theoretical mood is also a mood. This theoretical attitude toward the world is only possible on the basis of a series of transformations whereby Dasein withdraws from its practical concerns and its immediate interests into a perspective where beings are disclosed, irrespective of their position, within the totality of means and ends in which they are initially revealed. And this goes to show that Heidegger in Sein und Zeit is not proposing things, he's not making statements, he's showing. And that takes work and time. And what he shows is the working process of the theoretical mood. That understanding takes explanations, which are very shorthand here in Hans Rein's article, of course. You can't add 50 pages. But once you understand that, how the objective of theoretical mood is working, you've done the lesson as Gödel did, come to the same point of understanding. And then you will not fall into the trap of psycholization of the Dasein. As I said before the summary, thus the topic of moods is not a psychological issue, but an ontological issue. And it's only by freeing it from the psychological interpretations that its true importance can be appreciated. See here how this mood, this particular mood, is constructing things. so to speak, an objective world of predicates, properties, all the other moods can also make things. They are making the world. They are the world. It's not an happy accident that Dasein means sein, there. We are speaking about sein here, being. And therefore it is of utmost importance to exactly understand the working process of the theoretical mood. And not as many postmodernists criticize it, because if you do not understand it, if not understood, psychologicalization of Dasein will happen in your own Dasein. It's not enough to say to a sick person, don't be sick. It needs to be given rehabilitation, help, medication, training. And then, like a big flower, it will open up. And you, by understanding the moods, you will have an entry into the thinking of Heidegger. It's a specific way of disclosing. It's not bad, not good, but you need to understand how it's working. And it does it by covering up things where you are coming from, the background of this, the Geschichte, the Befindlichkeit, the Entwurfness, if you like. All those features go into the shadow for the theoretical Stimmung to be able to do its job. Once that is understood, you, so to say, get Dasein for free. In your system, Dasein will not have this psychological interpretation, but it is not enough to say, do not psycholize Dasein. It wouldn't even make any sense until you understand fully the working process. There is a good reason for the many words in Sein und Zeit. They are not put there for Heidegger was happy to write things. So, well, I'm criticizing myself here and my attempt to condensate Heidegger. Of course, it cannot be done. But it can be done with the extensive background we have in this lecture series. That I do believe. So, neither Heidegger, and I compare him to Wittgenstein. We had a comparison series 300 lectures ago, but they are not proposing statements. They're not saying things about the world or the ego or the psychological self. They are showing or teaching quite different. Maybe a political doctrine can be condensated into a few articles. I doubt even that, but it is at least slightly possible. But this cannot. Certain things needs to be embodied. And the theoretical mood is a mood we all have. And of course it leads to the Gödel problem if not handled properly. Maybe Kalle, you have some comments here? Let's see, put it on there.
Sometimes footnotes are important. This time I will read footnote 32. These lectures, Grundbegriffe per Aristotelischen philosophy, have not yet been published. That is by Heidegger's lectures. They only exist in a transcript by H. Marcuse, to which I have had access. That is Hans Ruin, but from which I cannot quote. The course is also summarized with quotations in Theodor Giesiel's The Genesis of Heidegger's Being and Time. So this shows that there is still much to be discovered about the early Heidegger. That is the relationship between Heidegger versus Aristotle. How did Aristotle influence Heidegger? And Ruin shows that in rhetoric, Aristotle discusses how man finds himself in shifting moods. The first example is joy and pleasure. So that was something that struck me here. Let me see this. It was a complicated sentence. Yes, so you mentioned, I will paraphrase it, it's about this it's not a psychological mood, it's not a psychological state, but it's an ontological issue, that is our relationship to the world. So how can we explain to people who are not studied Heidegger? So if I can summarize it, let's say it's not about psychology, something that is inside you, so to say, separate from the world, but it is an ontological issue, that is how we are related in the world, we are integrated with the world. So I suppose you agree, since you are Niki.
Yeah, it's true. And I also want to pinpoint extra this, it's a bit beside the point, but it's connected, and that's the didactic or pedagogical point, that if you don't have an understanding of this established, this is, I would say, is inevitable, because you will not be able to discern how you yourself make objective statements and understandings, and then you, so to speak, you will need in yourself the idea of a psyche or subjectivity to sort of make a division with yourself, or your system needs to be working. That's a pedagogical feature, and that is handled with excellence both in Heidegger and Wittgenstein. But you're absolutely right, Kalle. Yes, definitely. It's very much to the point. I'm happy you understood it. Well, we continue with this later. Thank you very much for your patience, and have a very pleasant afternoon. Bye bye for now.